Someone tell Nicole she labeled the folders backward again, Dave muttered, loud enough to be heard across the open floor. The VC laughed, one of those polite, I have money and no spine chuckles, and sipped from a glass bottle of some designer water. Dave kept going. She's like a glorified admin with opinions. We keep her around because she's too boring to steal from us. I was behind the glass wall of the conference room when I heard it, not hidden, not snooping, just forgotten, like usual. I was updating our MSA revision tracking log because, fun fact, our legal team never learned version control and prepping risk documents for the acquirer's third-party audit team. The same acquirer Dave was trying to woo with big talk and fake polish. The same one that needed our internal systems to not look like a house of cards glued together with marketing buzzwords. I didn't even flinch when he said it, just kept typing. I'd gotten good at that, hearing garbage and pretending it was white noise. Still, something about that phrasing stuck in my teeth. Glorified admin. As if 6 years of building the compliance framework from scratch was just colored tabs and calendar invites. Before we go further, real quick, if you're listening and you've ever been underestimated in a job you basically built with your bare hands, subscribe and like this story. It helps the team here keep doing what we do, telling the real ones. And hey, it's free catharsis. Win-win. Anyway, back to Dave. That day wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. But it was the first time he said it while I was finalizing the contract language that made our $200M buyout possible. I'd been leading operations since the year we had folding tables and post-it note org charts. No one knew where anything lived but me. Payroll processing? Me. Vendor evaluations? Me. Cyber risk audits? Me. And when Dave got too bored to sit through legal calls, guess who stayed on to take notes and send summaries with all the key decisions? Yeah, me. The part that really cooked my nerves was how fast he forgot. Not just about my contributions, but about the risks I took for him. Like when I flagged a potential IRS misclassification that would have torpedoed our Series A. He told me to ignore it. I fixed it anyway, quietly. Didn't ask for credit, never got it, or when I restructured our vendor contracts to avoid a breach of exclusivity. His response, make it look pretty before I show it to investors. Pretty, right, but I wasn't bitter, I was practical, I wasn't there for applause. I was there because I liked clean systems and things that worked. That's it, I didn't need champagne, I needed peace. And for a long time, I thought that would protect me. That if I kept things running smoothly, if I didn't rock the boat, they'd keep me on through the acquisition. Maybe even offer me a sliver of something, an exit bonus, an advisory contract, hell, a LinkedIn endorsement. I didn't want the spotlight. I just didn't want to be erased. Which is why the next thing that happened shifted something in me. I was in the break room, printing out a compliance calendar for the upcoming quarter, because our systems were fancy, but our printer setup still smelled like 2009 when I caught wind of something new. Dave was talking to our HR director, voice low but not low enough. She's asking about buyout shares, he said, scoffing. Honey, you think I'd give a low-level employee a piece of the pie? She should be grateful we gave her a paycheck this long. My blood stopped moving, just stalled in place. Not because of the insult, I could weather that. It was the certainty in his voice, the way he was so sure I'd never question it, that I'd just nod, smile, and keep labeling folders backward. That's when I realized Dave didn't just underestimate me. He forgot I existed, and people who forget you exist, they never see you coming. I waited until the end of the day, not because I was scared, but because I didn't want an audience. That was the difference between Dave and me. He performed, I documented. I'd been at Meriton longer than any of his flashy growth hires. I'd written the internal playbook. I knew how things moved, how things got signed, and more importantly, who actually mattered when paper met pen. And yet, here I was rehearsing a single sentence in my head like I was asking him to prom. If the acquisition goes through, is there any kind of participation plan? For longtime team leads, that's how I phrased it, calm, measured. I even softened my voice a little, which made me hate myself more than him for a second. He was at the minibar in his office, pouring one of those bourbons with a wax-dipped top, like a man cosplaying as important. He didn't even look at me when he answered. Honey, he said, and it already felt like a slap. You think I'd give a low-level employee a share? He chuckled like he'd just delivered a punchline, then tossed the cap back on and finally glanced up. Nicole, come on, you're not, you've been great, really, but this level? This is for founders, for people who took risk. You've always been a stabilizer, not a multiplier. You know what I mean? I didn't. I didn't know what the hell he meant. I just knew I wanted to put the cap from that overpriced bottle directly through his laminated motivational poster that said disrupt or die. My jaw locked. I felt that heat crawl up my spine, one that always shows up half a second before a scream or a resignation letter, but I tamped it down. Took risk? I finally said, my voice flatter than his dumb whiskey. I took a pay cut to help build this company before you had revenue. I personally negotiated our first 3 vendor contracts. I wrote the very MSA that's making this acquisition legally possible. You drafted it, he said, waving a hand. Legal wrote it. No, I said, I wrote it, they proofed it. That made him blink just for a second. Then the smirk returned. Well, anyway, he said, shrugging, it's all gonna work out. You'll land somewhere good. There's always operations jobs at places that need stabilizers, that word again. Stabilizer, like I was a damn paperweight with a pulse. I didn't say goodbye, I didn't even close the door. I just turned and walked out like my shoes had a mission of their own. But inside, I was crumbling. Not because he called me low level. I'd been called worse. I'd cleaned up the messes of men who made PowerPoints with buzzwords they couldn't define. I'd fixed invoices that would have gotten us blacklisted. I'd watched interns who couldn't find their own inbox get equity because they crushed it on TikTok brand. No, it wasn't the insult. It was that, somewhere deep in my spine, I'd believed I mattered. Not for the praise, Dave didn't know how to give it, but for the impact. I thought the work itself would earn something real. And now I was standing in the parking garage, car keys in hand, teeth grinding, realizing that I had made the classic mistake, thinking you can logic your way into fairness. You can't. You don't earn equity by being good. You earn it by being seen. And Dave had made it crystal clear. I was invisible. That was the laugh that cracked everything open. The kind that echoes in your brain until it turns into a battle cry. Because the thing Dave didn't know, the MSA he called legal fluff, I still had the original version, the one with my name on it. And unlike his memory, contracts don't forget. The calendar invite just said Quick Sync HR, no agenda, no context. Just a 30-minute block dropped in my schedule at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I stared at it for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the decline button like it might set off an alarm. Already knew what it was. You don't schedule a quick sync with someone you've worked beside for 6 years, built systems with battled audits with, unless you're about to say something you don't want on Slack. HR was already seated when I walked in. So was Dave. That told me everything. Nicole, he said, with the fake smile he usually saved for trade shows. This is hard. No, Dave, what's hard is keeping your face still when your stomach is trying to fold in on itself. He kept talking. You've done incredible work here, truly foundational stuff, but as we pivot toward the acquisition, we're streamlining some of our operational layers. Unfortunately, that means we're restructuring a few roles. My role, restructuring like I was a broken patio chair. There was no performance warning. No needs improvement. Just a tidy little euphemism stapled to my spine and tossed into a cardboard box. The HR rep slid a slim envelope across the table. This includes a standard exit agreement and confidentiality reminder. No severance due to at-will status. Access will be disabled by noon. That was it. 6 years of building, balancing, fixing, preventing, reduced to a standard envelope and a deactivated badge. I didn't speak, not out of fear, out of strategy. Words in that moment would have felt like confetti at a funeral, and I wasn't ready to bury anything yet. I went back to my desk, or what was left of it. Someone had already packed it, trophies, notebooks, the stress ball shaped like a brain I used during budget calls. Even the plant was gone. Just a ghosted rectangle of sun-bleached carpet where it used to sit. Nobody said goodbye. A few heads popped up, then ducked back down like prairie dogs spooked by thunder. Carried the box past the glass wall where Dave once called me a glorified admin. Past the receptionist who avoided eye contact. Past the office mural that said think bigger in 10-foot letters, which now read like a cosmic joke. But I didn't cry. I didn't break down in the parking lot. I didn't spiral into rage or texts to old coworkers or wine-fueled rant threads. Instead, I drove home. I opened my laptop. And I opened my copy of the MSA, the Master Services Agreement I co-authored, the one Dave liked to pretend had always been his doing. I knew exactly where the clause was, because I drafted it myself after we missed a key compliance checkpoint during our Series B. Clause 7.4c, named Officer Transfer Provision. I read the line 3 times, even though I knew it by heart. Any material transfer of ownership, acquisition, or change of control must be reviewed and co-signed by the designated named officer listed in Exhibit D. My name was on Exhibit D. Not Dave's, not the CTO, not our outside counsel. Mine. I kept reading. In the absence of such co-signature, contractual obligations may be deemed unfulfilled under compliance guidelines per M and a pre-authorization protocol. Translation: if I don't sign off, the deal doesn't go through. Since Dave had fired me without amending the MSA or reassigning the named officer clause, he just nuked his own buyout with a single ego-driven email to HR. I closed the file. I stared at the wall, and for the first time in days, I smiled, not the kind you post on LinkedIn. The kind that lives behind your molars and waits, because now it wasn't just about revenge. It was about precision. He'd written me off, but I was still on the contract. And contracts don't go quietly. Her name was Sarah, and the last time we talked, she was standing beside me in a bar bathroom fixing my eyeliner after I sobbed through a breakup. Now she wore tailored suits, had a last name that made partners nervous, and specialized in M and a transaction so large they had their own gravity. I called her that night. No small talk. No how have you been, just, I need you to look at something. It's an MSA I co-authored. There's a named officer clause I think might have just become relevant. She didn't hesitate. Email it. Now. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Then I paced my apartment like a dog before a thunderstorm while she read. 10 minutes later she called back. Her voice had changed. Lower, slower, all business. Nicole, that clause is airtight. If your name's still on Exhibit D and they haven't updated it post-termination, the deal's frozen. You're the linchpin. My pulse thudded against my throat. And if I refuse to sign, they either renegotiate with you, she said, or the acquirer walks away. You're not just important, you're a compliance gate. No gate, no go. I sat down, suddenly aware of every muscle in my jaw. I don't want to nuke their deal, I said. Sarah laughed softly. You're not nuking anything. You're reminding them they forgot how the machine works, that you were the one keeping it oiled. But if I go to them directly, Dave, I mean, he'll spin it. He'll call me bitter, unstable, vindictive. He will, she said, which is why you're not going to him. That's when the real shift happened. She walked me through the next steps like a legal GPS, document chain of custody. Confirm clause visibility. Highlight contract version metadata. Screenshot Exhibit D with date stamps. And then, identify the right contact at the acquiring firm. We found her, Amelia Chang, Director of Compliance for the Buyer's Legal Division. Harvard Law. Veteran of 3 closed acquisitions. Not the kind of woman who ignored red flags. I drafted a message. Simple, direct, cold as tile. Dear Miss Chang, I'm reaching out to clarify my role regarding Exhibit D of the Master Services Agreement between Meriton Analytics and your firm. My designation as named officer remains in place, as no formal amendment or reassignment has been filed post my recent departure. I am willing to confirm this designation if needed. Please let me know how you'd like to proceed. Attached, PDF of the relevant clause, screenshots, timestamp metadata, even my original email to legal from 2 years ago confirming clause language. Sarah reviewed it, gave it a one-word reply, flawless. I sent it. Then I waited. Hours ticked by. I stared at the cursor in my inbox like it owed me money. I watched Dave post a photo of himself on LinkedIn holding a mock-up of the acquisition announcement. Big things coming soon, he wrote. I resisted the urge to reply with your pants are unzipped, and your lawyer forgot to read Exhibit D. The next morning, the reply came. Miss Palmer, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Our internal compliance team is reviewing the MSA now and will confirm next steps shortly. In the interim, please do not hesitate to reach out with any additional documentation or clarification. No exclamation marks. No delay, they knew exactly what I'd handed them, and they weren't ignoring it. I didn't feel joy, not yet. What I felt was something colder, sharper, like the click of a scalpel on steel. Dave had cut me out, but I was still in the bloodstream, and now I had the syringe. 2 days after I sent the email to Amelia Chang, I got the confirmation. Short, professional, terrifying if your name was Dave. Miss Palmer, we've flagged the named officer clause for further legal discussion. Thank you for your documentation. We'll be in touch prior to the signing event. Translation, we've just yanked the emergency brake on a $200 million joyride. But Dave? Dave had no clue. If arrogance were a fuel source, he could have powered the whole city. That week, he hosted 3 separate champagne toasts in the office kitchen, each one more unbearable than the last. He was walking around like he'd already been knighted. New haircut, new shoes. A suit that still had the tailoring chalk lines visible because he couldn't wait to show it off. He kept saying, once the ink's dry, we're unicorn status people, like a CEO from a cable show trying to act out his own LinkedIn post. Someone in product asked if the acquisition was finalized. He laughed and pointed a finger gun at them. Just a formality now, formality. I snorted so hard at my screen I scared my cat. It was all over social, too. His profile picture suddenly had one of those fake bokeh backgrounds and the caption, grateful to lead a team of visionaries. Big things ahead. Next chapter Meriton Magic. He changed his job title to founder and strategic innovator. I wondered if his lawyer was as confident as his Instagram filter. Because while Dave was doing investor zooms from his Tesla and testing out luxury watches for press photos, the acquirer's compliance team had quietly scheduled a full audit of the MSA. I knew because Amelia CC'd me on the internal calendar invite. Not by accident. Subject line, review of Exhibit D officer clause. It was happening, and they wanted me to know it. From my side of the fence, I watched Dave turn into a parody of himself. He started cutting staff he didn't think he'd need post-transaction. He fired 2 junior analysts in finance and said their duties would be automated after acquisition. He stopped showing up to ops stand-ups. He started showing up to podcast interviews. Every time he opened his mouth in public, I braced myself, half expecting him to name drop me, maybe even claim my work as his. But he didn't. He'd completely erased me. In his world, I had never existed. No Nicole, no clause, no loose thread that might unravel the whole thing, which made it even better. Because there's a special kind of satisfaction in knowing someone is about to be kicked in the teeth by a detail they couldn't be bothered to read. I didn't want money. Not really. I didn't even want revenge, if I'm honest. I just wanted recognition, not the public kind. The kind that stares a man in the eyes while he realizes, too late, that he wasn't the smartest person in the room. That someone he dismissed was the one holding the pin on his victory balloon. So I sat there, sipping wine out of a chipped mug, watching him post stories from what looked like a pre-deal celebration dinner. A dozen wine glasses. Fancy napkin folds. That smirk he wore when he thought the world owed him applause. I swiped past it and opened the email thread again. The one confirming they'd found the clause, confirming I was still listed. I didn't need to post. I didn't need to shout, because soon enough, they'd be the ones asking for my signature. The official meeting invite went out on a Thursday afternoon. Subject line, Merit and Acquisition Final Signing plus Press Readiness. Scheduled for the following Monday. In person. No Zoom. No quick sync, just suits, signatures, and seven-figure wire transfers. Dave posted a boomerang on Instagram of him clinking a glass of champagne with someone who looked like he named his kid after a yacht. Caption, locked and loaded. Final countdown. I didn't get an invite. Of course I didn't. I wasn't on the payroll. I wasn't on the org chart. As far as Dave was concerned, I was somewhere out in the ether, trying to freelance my dignity back. But I had eyes everywhere. A junior exec I used to mentor, Sammy, pinged me that night. She was still at Meriton, and while she didn't say much, she didn't have to. Is it true you were the named officer? My reply, why, did someone finally read the clause? She just sent back a skull emoji. Then, a few minutes later, legal looks nervous. I heard Dave yell something about a clerical oversight and then lock his office door. His lawyer's pacing like he's trying to hatch a time machine. Clerical oversight. That's how they were framing it. Turns out, in all the excitement of firing me, Dave's lawyer never formally updated the MSA. No amendment. No resolution to reassign my authority. No Exhibit D substitution. They assumed it would get cleaned up during final doc prep. It didn't, and now it was too late. The acquirer's compliance team had flagged the issue in their red line doc, but didn't say anything publicly. They were waiting for the meeting, for the signatures, for the moment Dave tried to bluff. That weekend, while Dave chartered a flight and posted a photo of himself in mirrored aviators like a sad tech Don Draper, I got an email from Amelia Chang. Miss Palmer, if available, I'd appreciate the opportunity to briefly connect prior to our final meeting on Monday. A member of our compliance group may wish to speak with you directly. I confirmed availability. She didn't send a calendar link, which told me everything. They weren't just acknowledging me, they were bringing me in. I had two choices: wait until the roof caved in and enjoy the echo, or walk into that room with the hammer in hand. So I packed my original copy of the MSA, the version I'd printed after legal finalized it, back when I still had access to the printer settings that mysteriously only worked when you threatened to unplug them. I printed Exhibit D on its own sheet, slipped it into a folder with my name highlighted. Monday came. Dave arrived first, of course. He wore a navy suit that fit like it had been poured onto him and brought a leather folio he never opened. The room was full of handshakes, chuckles, investor backslaps. He looked like a man 2 seconds from calling himself the talent. Across the table sat the acquiring team, polished, quiet, surgical, and seated among them. A woman I'd never met in person, but instantly recognized from her LinkedIn headshot. Amelia Chang. She didn't smile when she saw Dave, but when she looked toward the back of the room, she made a subtle gesture. Not to him, to me, because I was there. I hadn't walked in with the main group. I hadn't flashed my name tag or made small talk over bagels. I waited, observed. Let the delusion play out a little longer, until the moment when signatures were about to be exchanged. Until the moment when Dave leaned back in his chair and said, "All right, let's make some history." And that's when Amelia raised her hand. "One last thing before we proceed," she said, voice calm as glass. "There's an outstanding item in the MSA that requires clarification." She pulled out a copy, flipped to Exhibit D, tapped a name. The room fell quiet. I stepped forward. Dave's face did something I've never seen before. It emptied, like someone unplugged the man. "Nicole," he said, "just my name." But it came out like a question he never wanted to ask. Too late. I was already pulling out my folder. It started like every other dog and pony show I'd ever witnessed, only this one came with embossed folders and monogrammed pens. There were printed agendas, branded notepads, even a custom pastry tray in the corner shaped like the Meriton logo. Dave stood at the head of the table like he was hosting the Oscars, cracking jokes about legacy and innovation like he'd written a startup Bible no one asked to read. "Hard to believe we started with 4 desks and a busted Keurig," he said, grinning. "And now we're here, ladies and gentlemen." The Unicorn Club. Laughter. Light applause. Even the acquiring team gave him polite smiles, kind you offer toddlers showing off a drawing of a horse with 7 legs. I was sitting quietly near the edge of the room, unannounced. The acquirer had added me to the attendance list, technically, but not to the roster Dave had reviewed. Amelia insisted I be in the room. I didn't argue. Dave never looked in my direction. Either he didn't see me or couldn't process the fact that I existed outside his little narrative of triumph. The signing began, one by one. Key documents slid across the table. Investors leaned forward. Phones were raised for behind-the-scenes shots. Dave's signature scrawled across pages with a flourish like he was autographing history. And then, a pause. It was almost too small to notice. The acquirer's lead counsel, a man named Marcus with the calm demeanor of someone who's destroyed empires before breakfast, rested his hand on the folder and said, "Before we continue, there's one section that needs to be confirmed." He opened the MSA, turned it precisely to Exhibit D, slid it halfway across the table to Dave. "The signature is still required." He tapped the name. Mine, Dave blinked. His fingers twitched. I thought that got amended. No formal amendment was filed, Marcus said evenly. Your legal counsel did not submit a revision or updated Exhibit D. Our compliance team verified last week that this clause remains active. Silence dropped like a sandbag. The investors leaned back. Dave turned to his lawyer, who was already flipping pages like he could will a different version into existence. I sent you the revised one, Dave hissed. You told me we were good. His lawyer's face turned a shade that's normally reserved for oxygen-deprived swimmers. You sent me a draft with her name still on it, he muttered. Flagged it for internal follow-up. You said she was handled. I assumed Marcus held up a hand. Let's stay focused. This is a legally binding clause. Without the named officer's signature, the transfer of control is non-compliant with pre-acquisition conditions. The air shifted. No more champagne chuckles. No more investor nods. The room had flipped like a current reversing. Everyone was watching Dave now, not with admiration, with curiosity, caution. He looked down at my name like it was a curse carved into the contract. I stood slowly. No rush, no drama, just presence. Dave looked up, startled. Why are you even? She's here at our request. Amelia interrupted, stepping in with professional poise that cut through the tension like a scalpel. We contacted her directly once the oversight became clear. She holds the title per the unamended contract. But she's not even with the company anymore, Dave stammered, sweat starting to form along his hairline. Correct, I said, voice cool. Which makes it remarkable that I still have legal authority over the largest transaction in your company's history. He didn't speak, just stared. His lawyer leaned back like gravity had finally hit him. Marcus folded his hands. So the question is simple. Has she been contacted for signature? The room waited. Dave looked around like someone might save him. No one moved. And then, finally, swallowed hard and muttered, apparently not yet. Dave did what men like him always do when the floor cracks beneath their Gucci loafers. He pretended it was part of the dance. He laughed, not loud, not casual. That weird brittle chuckle that sounds like it's trying to find its way back to confidence. Guys, come on, he said, waving a dismissive hand over the contract like he was shooing a fly off a grill. That clause is outdated. Nicole's not with the company. We've moved on from that structure months ago. It's irrelevant now. He looked to Marcus, the acquirer's lead counsel, waiting for the nod of agreement that never came. Marcus blinked once, slowly, then said, we haven't. 3 words, that's all it took. The investors, who were already pulling back like guests watching a wedding cake topple, stiffened in their seats. The CFO went pale. Dave turned to his own lawyer, who by now looked like he was trying to remember whether malpractice insurance covered misplacing a clause that could derail a $200M deal. His lawyer leaned over and whispered. And though he meant it for Dave's ears only, the room had gone so quiet we all heard it. Oh no. Who did you fire? That was my cue. I stepped through the side door, calm as sunrise, in the navy blazer I hadn't worn since our series A Closing Dinner. No theatrics, no strut, just presence, real and undeniable. I held a slim leather folder under my arm, the kind executives used to pretend they aren't sweating, and inside it, a clean copy of the MSA, my copy. Dated, highlighted, notarized, with Exhibit D flagged by a cheerful little tab that said still me. Hi everyone, I said, loud enough to carry, soft enough to sting. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't needed before I headed out. Dave spun around like someone had tasered his spinal cord. Nicole, he said, my name flat and unfinished. Like he'd just remembered I had bones. I thought you weren't, he started, then shut his mouth halfway through the sentence, probably realizing anything he said next would be carved into legal transcripts. Amelia rose slightly from her chair and gestured to the empty seat beside her. You are, in fact, very much needed. I walked forward, heels clicking louder than they had any right to in that carpeted room. Dave stared, eyes ping-ponging between me and the folder like I might pull out a grenade. I didn't sit immediately. I just opened the folder, flipped to Exhibit D, and laid it gently on the table. My name, in ink, in print, in force. Dave's jaw clenched so hard you could have cracked walnuts on it. One of the investors, an older man with the calm detachment of someone who's lost enough money to stop pretending, leaned toward him and said, why didn't this get reassigned? Dave tried to reply, but no sound came out, because there was no answer. Because deep down he knew he hadn't forgotten me. He'd ignored me. He thought I'd vanished like a bad quarterly report. And now here I was, flesh and bone and claws and signature. The room stayed frozen. All eyes shifted from Dave to me. Waiting, the person he called low level, the stabilizer, the glorified admin with opinions, and now, the only person who could close his deal. I didn't rush. I sat down slowly, like someone who knew the next 5 minutes were already written. Like I had rehearsed this moment in the quiet of my kitchen, while sipping gas station wine and staring at a copy of Exhibit D with a highlighter in one hand and a receipt for my self-worth in the other. Dave looked at me like he still hadn't decided whether I was a hallucination or a threat. I smiled politely, crossed my legs, then I opened my folder and slid a second document across the table, not the MSA. A single-page addendum, typed in 12-point, double-spaced, plain and brutal. It had 4 points. Backdated severance, commensurate with my tenure and responsibilities. an equity share, equal to what was promised verbally in the 2020 informal retention talk, and documented via Slack messages, which, yes, I had screenshots of. Public acknowledgement in the acquisition press release of my role as head of operations and co-architect of Meriton's compliance infrastructure. Immediate and permanent removal of David L. Grant from any advisory or strategic role post-acquisition. Dave's mouth opened. Marcus didn't let him speak. He leaned forward, read the page, nodded once, and said, "That's acceptable to us." Just like that, no negotiation, no counteroffer, no tantrum. Dave turned to him, voice strained, "You can't just cut me out of my own company." Marcus raised a hand again. "Your company failed to meet pre-closing compliance. Miss Palmer's cooperation is now necessary. You created the liability. We're solving it." Amelia slid a pen toward me. Dave's lawyer slumped back. Defeated, one of the investors let out the kind of sigh usually reserved for crashing stock tickers. I signed. The ink barely dry, Amelia slid the acquisition packet toward Dave. He looked at the page like it had teeth, but he signed. What else could he do? He had no clause, no leverage, no company without me. I stood, gathered my things, and tucked the addendum back into my folder like a finished spell. As I turned to leave, I caught one last glimpse of Dave, still sitting there, staring at my name next to his, two signatures on the same deal, only one of them written in control. He looked stunned, hollow, like someone just told him the lottery numbers and then reminded him he never bought a ticket. I didn't say goodbye, that would have implied we'd had something worth ending. But I did pause at the door. I looked over my shoulder, met his eyes, and said, "Honey, the clause didn't care about your opinion, just my title." Then I walked out, still the named officer, still not low level, and this time they all saw me. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.